I often don't give talks at Wisdom 2.0 because I'm hosting, and I feel like it's really my job to introduce other people. But many people then don't actually ever hear the story of how Wisdom 2.0 started, and they have all kinds of ideas that aren't true in their mind. So I thought I would tell a little bit about the story about Wisdom 2.0. And sometimes people look at me and they think, one, I was born in Silicon Valley, and two, I started some successful tech company, and then I just decided to go into this. And the truth is much more interesting and complicated than that. So I was going through a really difficult time in my life where I had a job that just ended, I had a marriage that just ended, and everything that I kind of knew to be me and real and what I identified as was kind of being taken away. Put this down. And so I had a year where I was unemployed, and I was living in a little trailer in New Mexico. And I remember I was paying $500 a month for the trailer in New Mexico, and I was trying to kind of grow my own food and live as long as I could off what little money I had, and see if I could call Chase every month and extend my credit card limit, which they were generally happy to do at a high interest. And I listened to a lot of Eckhart Tolle, who I really appreciated. One of the things that Eckhart used to say, don't ask what you want to do, ask what the world wants to do through you. So don't ask what you want to do, ask what the world wants to do through you. And so I sat with that for probably about a year. Like, what is it that the world wants to do through me? And I went through this period where I was really, really, really frustrated and pissed off. Like, I created this space, like, come on, world, fucking tell me what it is that you need me to do. Who's been in that space? Yes, like, come on. I've done all this. I'm like visualizing, like meditating, I'm doing the things. And one of the beautiful things that I got from him was like, actually being present is the greatest way to tune into your purpose. It's not about actually dreaming up something in the future, but it's actually being present right now. And so I remember practicing just being present, and I was going for a walk one day, and it's like a breeze just kind of came across me. And it's like I was hit by something. It's the best way I can describe it. And I got this idea, and it was like wisdom and technology. Yes, it's like chocolate and peanut butter, right? Like the two go together, like yes. And so I was like, okay, I got it now. And so I wrote a book called Wisdom 2.0, and as most authors do, they think Oprah's going to call the next day once the book is published. She didn't. And it didn't really make the dent in the universe that I wanted it to. And I was, again, in those moments where like, come on, universe. I thought we had a plan here. I'm doing what I'm doing. And then the universe said, or something happened. I was like, well, what if this isn't a book? This is actually a community conversation. And what if there's a conference to emerge out of this? And as any kind of entrepreneur knows or person knows, like once you start something and you get hit and you fail and you kind of come up against a wall, it doesn't mean it's time to quit. It just means it's time to innovate and think kind of differently. And so I was sitting in New Mexico in my trailer, and I knew nobody in tech. Nobody in tech. And I had a friend of a friend who knew somebody who worked at Google or something like that. So I was like, cool, I'll work on that thread because I knew I wanted to involve the technology leaders. And I knew that there was something that was trying to emerge in me, and I guess that it was trying to emerge in other people too, that we love technology, but in and of itself, it's somewhat like crazy making. Has anybody noticed crazy making technology? I was like, wow, look, I've got 5,000 friends. And it's like, oh shit, I've got 5,000 friends, and I need to like their posts, and I need to get back to them, and they just said this nice thing about me, I have to say this nice thing about them, and there's the news cycles, just kind of constant. And so I felt like there was this community that wanted to arise that wanted to be conscious and wanted to grow and wanted to be thoughtful and mindful. And I thought of the world that my kid was going to grow up in, and I got really scared and nervous. Like, what is this world that we're bringing our kids into where they know how to, develop they know how to code and they know how to build a website and build an app, but they don't know how to look across the table to somebody and actually see them and hear them. And I began to get very concerned about what is this world that we're creating. And so I learned a couple different interesting things. One is that if you tap into a vision that's bigger than you, it's like supercharged. If it's a vision that's like the world actually needs in that moment, and you're not trying to make it about yourself, there's a power to that. And that people come together and support you that you never would have thought of. So Joseph Campbell has a quote. He says, when you follow your bliss, and by bliss I mean that inner tug of your heart, when you follow that, doors will open where you never thought there to be doors, and where there wouldn't be doors for anyone else. And something about the integrity of a life and the universe moves in to help. And I didn't know what the hell that meant completely at that time, but I knew I wanted to be in that space. I wanted to live such a life of integrity that the universe will be like, let's help this guy out, like let's give him some support. So that's really how Wisdom 2.0 started. And I remember in the early days, I wanted to get one speaker, and I wasn't quite sure how I could get that first speaker because I had no experience. And so I remember somebody had said yes. Well, actually, Roshi Joan Holofox said yes, and this other guy named Chris Saka had said yes. And fortunately, neither of them asked who else was speaking, which was like such a relief to me because they were the only one speaking. And I remember if I have one speaker and I have one audience member, we're good. Like that was my goal, like one speaker and one audience member. And with the help of Jillian, and who's here, and the Fetzer Foundation, we actually were able to rent a place for a couple hundred people. And we had several hundred people show up. But what the biggest lesson for me was that when we tap into a kind of a vision where the universe is working through us, it's not about the ego and about me and I'm so great and let me come and give my 5 lessons for success or let me come and tell the world how wonderful I am, which has some value, but it's really about community and it's about a vision for the world that's bigger than us. And like any vision, we need others to join it. Otherwise, it's very lonely. And so for me, one of the biggest inspirations has been how many people from so many, I think there's about 30 different countries here, felt that same pull, right? Like they felt something that they wanted to say yes to. And to me, that's the greatest gift that I've ever received, I think, is the gift of a shared purpose. And you can have all the money in the world and all the fame, and I've met people who have a lot of both of those, and they're not necessarily happier. But when you have real friends, you have real community, you have a real vision, you're working to create a better world, and you're living from your heart, like that's something that nothing can buy, and to create a community that's based on that is such a unique gift. And so for me, you make my dreams come true. Because otherwise it'd just be me on stage and it's just not nearly as fun. But I really want to inspire all of us too, that we all have something that we want to bring forth in the world. And I think Jack spoke to this. Each one of us has a gift. So this conference isn't just about hearing about well-known tech leaders like Ev, who we really appreciate, or teachers like Jack and Trudy, who we also really love. But it's also really about you and what is that you want to bring into the world. What is your gift? What is your contribution to this world? What is it that on your deathbed, whether that's one day from now or 50 years from now, will make you kind of think, wow, I did it. I might have messed up 10,000 times, but I actually followed that impulse of my heart towards something that made sense inwardly, even if it didn't make sense externally. It made no sense externally for me to start a conference. Like we were in a recession at the time, I had no experience, I didn't know anybody. Like externally, any financial planner would have been like, this is the worst decision you can make here. But internally, it made sense. Internally, it just felt like, this is my contribution. And so my hope is that this conference, while you're learning a lot and taking part in dance classes and breakouts and yoga and meditations, that it's also time for you to tap into that inner voice inside yourself and really reflect on, is the contribution you're making now one that feels genuine? And is there something that also wants to be spoken through you? And can you find the right people and the right support to nurture that, to water that, to tend to that? Like any seedling, it needs sun, it needs water, it needs love. And so my hope with this community is that we can be that for each other. And you might be a weirdo in your own community in Spokane, Washington, but here you fit in, or wherever you come from. So I feel like we're a bit of that kind of different kind of world. And so my hope would be that for these next couple of days, you can actually use it as a kind of a meditation and a reflection about what matters to me, and am I living that, and am I bringing that forth? And how do I find the right support and the right people who would do that? I remember early on in Wisdom 2.0 when I was trying to reach out to people. So for example, Ev, who was here earlier, I emailed him 5 years in a row and he said no to speak, because it was still, or no, 5 years, 3 years. It was a number of years I had emailed him, and he said no. And I just kept coming back. I'm like, hey, Ev, me again. Yeah, year 3, will you come? And eventually he said yes, and he's become a friend and like a part of the community. And so there needs to be a certain determination, I think, that we have, and a certain vision that we're compelled by something that's bigger than us. And to me, the world doesn't need more, what's the word? The world doesn't need more, and the world doesn't need like more kind of leaders in the sense. What they need is more people following and living that core value, and following and living that contribution that makes sense. And I feel like if we can create a world where all of us are living in our bliss, and all of us are living in our purpose, and all of us are living in our full potential, then the world that our kids are going to grow up in is very different than the world now. And I think one of the beautiful things about our current political system is you can look at our leadership without naming names, and you can see how much suffering goes in to thinking you always have to be right, to thinking that everybody else is the enemy, to always having to say something negative about another person in order to feel better about yourself. Like, it's such an example of somebody with so much wealth and so much power, and who suffers so much and creates suffering. So there needs to be a different model, and there needs to be a different way. And my hope is that this community can help to showcase and move forward that way. And I wish we could rely on the Democratic Party and the Republican Party and the Green Party to do it, but I don't think they can, actually. I think they're very beautiful and wonderful and have a contribution, but it also feels like there's a contribution for us to make. And that contribution is about listening deeply. That contribution is about being present. That contribution is about trying to be compassionate, even so freaking hard sometimes, and trying to be empathetic, even though that's super hard sometimes. So I feel like there's a movement that's needed in our culture, and I'm honored and joyful and proud to be a part of that movement and part of that community with you. And I feel like the world needs that. You know, they need people who, you know, if you look at what my children, I've got a few children now, and if you look at like what it makes to raise a child, like, yeah, they need love and they need support and they really need encouragement and they need to be seen. And no amount of money and no amount of fame can provide that for them. So I guess I just want to say you're welcome as a part of this community, and I honor you and I thank you for coming, and that I really want you to use this time as a reflection for your own gift and what that gift might be. And I feel like Wisdom 2.0 is set up to try to support you in living that gift. So while there's many wonderful, famous speakers that we might have, if that's all that it's about, I think we're missing an opportunity. And I think hopefully what you get from this stage inspires you to then take action and to bring out your own voice into the world. And so as an organization, you know, we want to support that. So that's a little bit about the actual story of Wisdom 2.0. And again, I really want to thank you, and we have a few more sessions to do tonight before we're done.